Well, it appears the NHL season has officially begun because here we are reacting to what is. Are you ready for this? We haven't done this in a minute. Da-na-na, da-na-na. Welcome to the breaking news edition, courtesy of Marco D'Amico's colleague at rg.org with RG Media, Jimmy Murphy, on the latest speculation around not just the Montreal Canadiens, but in the world of it, is if it's too good to be true, Marco, it generally is too good to be true. The Montreal Canadiens have upwards of $4.6 million in salary cap space. Here we are talking about Boston Bruins center Pavel Zacha, who makes $4.75 this year and next before he hits UFA free agency. Marco, this deal on the surface, before we dive into it, seems very, very appealing to Ken Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens and their fans. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. I mean, yeah, targeting Pavel Zacha, I understand it. Yeah, there's multiple reasons for it. Obviously, I don't think that there's anything imminent yet on that front. But the Canadiens, when you get to this point in the season, you're looking to, set yourself up with realistic targets about what's to come and where things are going. And when you look at where things are going with the Canadiens, obviously they'd like to add to their roster to help them make the playoffs, not this season, but for many seasons to come. One of the things that's really attractive about Zacha right off the bat, you mentioned the cap hit, $4.75 million, but for an additional season. So if he were ever acquired during the season, not only can the Canadiens take that cap hit because they moved Carey Price's contract, they have almost exactly the amount necessary to acquire a guy like Zacha, but he would also be around for next season, serving as a potential stopgap who could be extended, worst case scenario, but a potential stopgap for Michael Hage, who would not be rushed to the NHL.
When it comes to fitting it in with the Montreal Canadiens and the 47 points, the 14 goals, the salary cap number, it all makes a lot of sense. But what about the timing of it all? Like, the season hasn't begun. The Montreal Canadiens rookie camp finally begins on Thursday, right? Where they're going to play get into some practice before the showcase on the weekend against Winnipeg and Toronto. The main camp opens next Wednesday. Is it too premature? Part of me thinks it's too premature. We've spent episodes talking about Kirby Dach as the 2C option. Mm-hmm. Can he, will he, won't he? We still don't have an answer to that. Do you think internally Ken Hughes and Jeff Gordon already have an answer to that question between them?
I don't think so necessarily. And again, and this is why I wanted to stress, there is nothing imminent yet about this, but the Canadiens are definitely doing their due diligence on who could be available for what reason, this and that. When I said that they were leaving no stone unturned this summer, I had heard about them looking into McTavish. That's a no. I had heard about them looking into seeing what was available with Jared McCann. That's still a no. And Seattle very much in the same situation as Boston. It's kind of an organizational crossroads of, are they going to take the next step? Are they going to be a playoff team? Or are they just going to pack it in come American Thanksgiving and go hard for the 2026 draft? Pavel Zacha, and you look at another center, though I don't think he necessarily fits the bill for what Montreal wants, but Casey Middlestat. Those two guys, in my honest opinion, are prime jettison candidates for the Boston Bruins if they find themselves in the same spot they were last year. Where they finished, I believe, fifth to last. Right. And so if they're in that same framework at the American Thanksgiving trade freeze area, sources tell us, Jimmy did some really good work on this. We've both kind of heard the same thing, but he got someone to actually discuss this with internal knowledge of the fact. But the Bruins still think they're a playoff team and they will still be pushing for the playoffs. If they find themselves outside looking in at American Thanksgiving, that conversation changes because you have to factor in they have Matthew Poitras in playing in Providence, right? They just drafted a very good center in James Higgins. So their future center line, Elias Lindholm is still there. Their future center line is still intact. They could shed salary and potentially improve at other positions, be it on the wing, be it on defense, and especially from what we're hearing, if Zacha goes, they want a piece on defense that's good not only for now but for the future. So this is why the conversation makes sense for a team like Montreal, because Montreal, a lot of young defensemen. In fact, there's a logjam right now that you could also argue, and so eventually when they have to figure out which of, an Arbor Jack guy, a Jaden Struble, a Mike Matheson,
Right.
David Reinbacher, Adam Engstrom, who is going to be the last three on the Canadiens org chart when they start their roster the year, in 2026, 2027. Well, that's when you can have like an expendable asset conversation with the Boston Bruins should Pavel Zacha be made available.
Well, right off the hop, I got to tell you, my instinct, in the aftermath of the reporting through Jimmy Murphy, through rg.org and RG Media, is you run, don't walk to this possible transaction, right? So, if we put this up on, I agree. So like we put this up on the screen as you're reading it now, and if you're listening on the audio side of things, I'll go quickly because I just want to reiterate here as I'll highlight this portion. It's very important we point this out. While a trade doesn't seem to be imminent at this point, I think it's important to point that out. No one's saying that the deal is coming tomorrow, but we're talking about a 28-year-old who's 6'3", and some of the names here in terms of what sources told RG, different trade scenarios have been discussed. No names confirmed. Sources say the Canadiens are looking at perhaps Joshua Roy, Oliver Kapanen, Jaden Struble on the defensive side of things as names continue to be bandied about. And
I just want to bring one little precision to that.
Yeah, sure.
I haven't heard the Canadiens offering Jaden Struble, but I've heard Boston like asking for, if not liking very much to a lesser degree, Jaden Struble, who is a hometown boy.
Precisely, well said, and very accurate to point out in this discussion that we're having about the potential of the Canadiens looking hard at centerman Pavel Zacha from the Boston Bruins, that on the surface, my initial reaction is I don't think Canadian fans in this market would be sweating that type of transaction, whether it's Kapanen, Roy, Struble, even if it's a 2-for-1, just for the sheer fact that I think in the hypothetical that turns into the reality where Pavel Zacha does get moved to Montreal, I mean, it closes the door on a massive hole that this team has not yet properly filled. And so, maybe looking at Jaden Struble, looking at Oliver Kapanen, who they might turn into, you're getting a guy who does it at the NHL level right now. And I'm always in favor of the guys that have done it, Marco.
Yeah, and I mean, there's two ways of looking at this. And obviously, you could play devil's advocate in this situation and say, well, is Pavel Zacha the kind of 2C that's going to take you to the next level? I think he's the kind of 2C that can help you hover at the next level. And, when you're playing, if you play him in between a guy like Ivan Demidov and eventually Patrick Laine or a Zach Bolduc, that line becomes ever more dangerous because they have a different identity than the top line in the sense that it's got more jam to it. It's got more oomph to it. And I feel like Zacha brings a lot of what Nick Suzuki does to a degree, but with a little bit more juice to it. 6'3", bigger frame, defensively sound, good on faceoffs. I think that would take such a load off of Nick Suzuki that it would allow Nick Suzuki to not have to be the all-purpose guy. He could still be the man, for the mission, but at the same time, he doesn't have to be the Saving Private Ryan kind of guy from beginning to end of game. So if you understand what I'm saying here, alleviating that pressure. But also, it wouldn't just alleviate that pressure for Nick Suzuki. And in my opinion, this is reminiscent of, and I'm not saying the two would be the same kind of impact, but this is reminiscent of when the Canadiens acquired Noah Dobson. How much pressure was taken off of David Reinbacher when they acquired Noah Dobson, because David Reinbacher was no longer seen as the savior at that position. Well, the same would apply to Michael Hage, right? It gives Michael Hage the necessary time to continue to develop. He's going to play another year in the NCAA this year. If he pops off, like many believe he's going to pop off with a better roster and obviously a much better physique going into the season, then there's a reality that he spends most of the year next year after he signs his ELC in Laval to truly kind of get ready. And then, Pavel Zacha's deal comes up exactly at that point. And then you could have a conversation. So the timing, the fit, everything makes sense. All we were missing was a clear indication that the Canadiens had demonstrated verifiable interest, and we can confirm that now. The question simply is a question of circumstance. And we've spoken about this before. Now it's a question of who else is going to be available, and more importantly, how many other teams are going to be involved in this? Because we've spoken about the Canadiens, but the Calgary Flames would be in on this. Oh, if the Vancouver Canucks would be all over this. You're looking at a bunch of teams across the league that would jump at the opportunity to add a guy like him. And so the market will probably be fierce unless there are other options made available. Should he even be made available come American Thanksgiving holiday trade freeze?
I don't know if there's a trend there, but he's an East Coast guy. He's played for the Devils. He's played for the Bruins. So he's stayed in our side of the time zone. If you want to read anything into that, what I choose to read into heavily is 82 games, 78 games, 82 games. His last 3 seasons, 21 goals, 14 points, 14 goals, excuse me. So the last 3 seasons of goal totals for Pavel Zacha. Tell me your educated opinion on what the Bruins lack, what they're looking for, and Joshua Roy, Oliver Kapanen, Jaden Struble, are any of those names or combination of those names, or feel free to add to it. How attractive are some of these assets in the eyes of the Boston Bruins as far as you're concerned?
I think that if they were that heavily attractive to them, a deal would already be done. A. B, the outweighing of the value proposition to me obviously becomes when he becomes available. So if you look at their overall needs, right? The Boston Bruins have drafted a center 4 years in a row with their first selection. Obviously, they didn't always have their first because they were competing for cups. But you look at Dean Letourneau last year, you look at Higgins, I just spoke about, Will Moore drafted right there. So down the middle, I find they are rather set, which is, you're retooling. That's probably where you're going to want to put your assets at first.
Yeah.
But really, it is on defense that they need the most amount of addition. And they tried to add a couple of pieces as well. Trading for Victor Soderstrom was definitely one of those things in the offseason, trying to piece together their defense. I mean, they have an excellent base, right? You have, Lindholm and McAvoy left and right, 1-2, and then Nikita Zadorov on your second pair. Like, that's a good base. It's not a terrible defense by any stretch of the imagination. And then you kind of have to fill out your roster accordingly. And they have Lohrei that is young and up and coming, didn't have the best defensive campaign last year, but they're looking for a defenseman that can come in and make a difference. Specifically, though, on the right side. And I think this is where a player like Struble would be of value, because we've seen Struble play both sides for the Montreal Canadiens. He was playing, I believe, and I could be wrong, and I don't have the tape in front of me, but I remember just from watching, bird's eye view. But when he was playing with Lane Hudson, Struble was playing on the right side, and that pairing worked very well. So I'd be very interested to see how that kind of dynamic would work, because Struble plays with that kind of la grogne, as we say in French, that kind of gnarly, like angriness in his game, despite not being like a tower like Arbor Xhekaj, that could be attractive to a team like the Boston Bruins. And then at that point, you go and see what can happen in terms of fit. You have to throw in a pick here or there. But the notion is the Montreal Canadiens, I think I've been saying this since the very get-go, since our interview with Jeff Gorton, the Montreal Canadiens are dressing themselves a list of potential centers that will be available. If anybody comes up now, great. But they're looking at December. They are looking to add in season. They don't believe you have to go into next season and add. And that's only if Kirby Dach doesn't rise to the occasion. So consider all of these necessary points of covering your bases so that when the time comes, you're not scrambling for options. You've already had conversations of what teams are looking for, and that's exactly what they've done.
You mentioned an interesting name there because he was also front of mind, because just the reputation, the style that this Montreal Canadiens player brings with him when he's dressed and in the lineup is Arbor Xhekaj. I'm not.
Hell no.
I am a proponent of scared money don't make money, but I fall into the trap of, my God, you can't move Arbor Xhekaj out of the freaking Boston Bruins and have this guy potentially terrorize you for the foreseeable future. Like, do you think general managers think along those lines? I mean, this is a division. This is a rival. This is a historic rival to the Montreal Canadiens. Yeah. And you probably, I can tell you for a fact that Arbor Xhekaj had an uncomfortable time for a chunk of time within the Canadiens organization. And
Yeah.
I'll repeat what I've said many times with you here. David Savard really was very important to Arbor Jackeye, developing.
Keeping him grounded.
Man, this guy going there with a chip on his shoulder, you just can't make a move like that, Marco. You can't do it.
If ever Arbor Jackeye is traded, if you're the Montreal Canadiens, you got to trade him out west. Out to the Pacific Division, where you only see him twice a year.
Correct.
Correct. But I'm not. Please don't shoot. I'm not advocating to trade Arbor Jackeye. I'm just saying, if ever you did, don't trade him to Boston.
Yeah,
I don't think that would ever happen. Not to Boston, not to the team that he also grew up hating. It's not happening. Yeah. But I will say, the Boston Bruins traded Brendan Carlo to the Toronto Maple Leafs in a pretty big transaction, right? A first, Fraser Minton, etc. Yeah. And then they traded Brad Marchand to another divisional rival in the Florida Panthers. So they clearly do not have kind of that ick. I know Montreal Canadiens, Boston Bruins haven't made a trade in a while, but you're also dealing with two GMs out of Boston, right? EVP, Jeff Gordon, long connection to the Boston Bruins. You're looking at Kent Hughes. I think Sweeney is very, and Neely to a degree as well, very familiar with Kent Hughes. So I don't think there's that level of animosity. And I mean, listen, if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs and you're trading with the team that's embarrassed you in the playoffs for basically a decade and a half, you could trade with the Montreal Canadiens, right? Like it's going to happen. And the Canadiens and the Bruins actually did do a trade at the draft, right? The Bruins, I believe, traded up or vice versa. And we all just started like flipping our hands and going like, this never happened.
Yeah.
But
it's like the
ideally,
69th pick, right? For the 70s and 100s. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's why I'm saying it's very possible that the limitations that previously existed are gone. Right. And if you're the Boston Bruins, you're taking the best offer. And so that's where I say that the Canadiens have interest in Pavel Zacha, but I will stress this. There are far hungrier teams than the Montreal Canadiens right now out there. I've spoken about the Vancouver Canucks. The Vancouver Canucks are trying to do everything to convince Quinn Hughes to stay. That includes the acquisition of a second-line center. So if one becomes available, I would assume that they would be hot on that. The Calgary Flames already, we know, have basically shown interest in every possible center made available, including Marco Rossi for that matter. So we'll have to see where that goes. But ultimately, like, the Canadiens are clearly setting the frameworks of discussions. So when the time comes and those players are made available, they can swoop in, be part of the conversation, and have their word to say, because you saw it with Noah Dobson. They checked in with Noah Dobson around the trade deadline. We're not sure. And then when the moment they found out that Noah Dobson was available, boom, they went in, swooped in, and attacked real quick, even though the Columbus Blue Jackets were farther along in talks. And that's what the Canadiens are doing here.
And it's nice that the team has cap flexibility to be able to do what Marco just described. When the opportunity presents itself for you to pounce on it, they have the cap flexibility and the prospect pool to be able to be aggressive, to jump over teams like Vancouver or Calgary if they deem Pavel Zacha worthy enough to make that maneuver or those type of maneuvers to fill the hole that everybody knows the Canadiens need to fill. So keep it locked to this channel for all the latest breaking news around the Montreal Canadiens. Thank you so much. We have hit over 10,000 subscribers. What a monumentous occasion. So if I were wearing a cap, I would tip it towards you. Maybe, Marco, you can pick me up as a great teammate. Thank you, sir. You can support us by continuing to support our sponsors like Little Bear, littlebearonline.com for delivery for all your pets' needs. They are part of the family, so you would take care of them. And you can thank Chuck and his all-star staff. It's a family-owned business that cares about your pet as much as you do. Check them out for delivery. They have daily specials, month-long specials, and start thinking about getting your dog nice and cozy, your kitty nice and cozy for those chilly fall and winter nights. Shop only at Little Bear at littlebearonline.com.